Your wedding budget is $5,000. Your brother Matthew's was $90,000. Mom announced, looking me dead in the eye at our family brunch. She smiled at him, then looked back at me. Joshua, let's be honest. You're just not as important to the family. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a massive scene. I just looked at my 9-year-old daughter, who was sitting next to me holding a hand-drawn card for her grandmother, and I made a silent promise. Within 48 hours, I canceled the entire wedding, packed our bags, and we eloped to Italy. What happened next completely destroyed my mother's fake, wealthy reputation and left my golden child brother entirely bankrupt. Thank you for being here. Grab a warm glass of water, sit down, and listen to me tell the whole story. And before we get into the crazy details of what happened in Italy, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. To understand how my own mother could say something so incredibly cruel without even blinking, and why the revenge I took was so severe, you have to understand what my life was actually like. The betrayal didn't start at that restaurant. It started years earlier. It involved a stolen identity, a massive pile of debt, and a dark family secret they thought I would never, ever find out. I still hear my mother's voice every single time I close my eyes and think about that Sunday morning. We were at the Oakwood Hills Country Club, the kind of overly manicured, aggressively expensive establishment where the valet drivers wear vests and the waiters serve you water with white cotton gloves. I felt entirely out of place in my off-the-rack gray button-down shirt. The collar felt too tight against my neck. I am a mechanic by trade. My hands are permanently calloused, and no matter how much pumice soap I use, there is always a faint shadow of motor oil beneath my fingernails. Sitting directly across the heavy mahogany table from me was my younger brother, Matthew. The brunch had been painfully tense from the moment we sat down. My father stared silently at his plate of eggs, chewing methodically, doing what he has done for 40 years, remaining absolutely invisible so he wouldn't become the target of my mother's wrath. Then, my mother tapped her mimosa glass with a heavy silver spoon. The sharp, crystal ringing cut through the low murmur of the dining room. The table went dead quiet. She set the spoon down and dabbed the corners of her mouth with a linen napkin. So, about the wedding. My mother started, her tone flat, businesslike, and completely devoid of any maternal warmth. Your father and I have sat down with the accountant, and we have run the numbers. We have made a decision. I leaned forward slightly, giving her my full attention. Your wedding budget is $5,000, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. Your brother Matthew's was $90,000. She didn't look ashamed. In fact, she turned her head and smiled at Matthew like she had just handed him a championship trophy. Matthew smirked, taking a slow sip of his coffee, looking incredibly pleased with himself. Then, my mother's gaze snapped back to me, her expression hardening. Joshua, let's just be brutally honest here. You're just not as important to the family, she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. You're older. You already have a kid from a previous mistake. You have your little job at the garage and you're stable. You don't need a big show. It would be a waste of resources. I stopped breathing. The ambient noise of the country club, the clinking silverware, the soft jazz playing through the overhead speakers, completely faded away. The blood roared in my ears. Oh, and another thing, she added casually, swirling the orange juice in her glass. Lily won't be in the formal family photos at the ceremony. We're keeping it traditional. Just blood relatives and the immediate bridal party. My hands went completely numb. I didn't feel the heat of anger right away. I felt that sick, tight, suffocating knot deep in my stomach. The feeling you get when a terrible truth you have been pretending not to see is finally dragged out into the harsh daylight. I slowly turned my head to look at my daughter. Lily was sitting perfectly still. She is a quiet, polite child, the kind of kid who says, "Excuse me," to a chair if she accidentally bumps into it. She stared at my mother, her little hands gripping the edge of the heavy tablecloth, her knuckles turning white. The hand-drawn card was pushed to the side. Forgotten. She slowly leaned into my arm. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice trembling so badly it cracked. Did I do something wrong? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Felt like swallowing broken glass. I wrapped my arm tightly around her small shoulders and pulled her close to my chest. No, sweetie, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You didn't do anything wrong. You are perfect. I looked around the table. My father looked out the window. Chloe went back to scrolling on her phone. Matthew just chuckled, cutting into his steak. Not a single person at that table looked at my little girl and said, "Of course you are in the photos." My jaw locked. The muscles in my neck tightened to the point of pain. In my family, the person who reacts to the disrespect is always immediately labeled the problem. So I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I just smiled a dead, empty smile, asked the waiter for the check, and paid for my own family's meal. But as I walked my daughter to the parking lot, feeling her small hand trembling in mine, a door closed inside my heart. I was done playing their game. To truly understand how we ended up at that table, and why my mother felt so comfortable disrespecting me in a crowded restaurant, you have to understand the role I was forced to play in my family. I was never the golden child. I was never the son they bragged about at their country club dinners. I was the family ATM. I was the reliable, invisible workhorse who fixed their problems, paid their bills, and was expected to quietly disappear until they needed me again. I didn't have a glamorous life. After high school, while my parents were paying full out-of-state tuition for Matthew to join a fraternity and barely scrape by with a business degree, I went straight to work. I took a job at a local auto repair shop, sweeping floors and changing oil filters until I learned enough to become a certified mechanic. I worked 60-hour weeks, coming home every night with my muscles screaming and grease permanently embedded in my skin. I made a very solid salary, but I traded pieces of my physical health for every single dollar of it. Things got incredibly hard in my early 20s. I ended up fighting a brutal, exhausting legal battle for full custody of Lily. Her biological mother was completely unfit, battling severe addiction issues and constantly disappearing for weeks at a time. I stepped up because that is what a real father does. I hired the best lawyer I could find, draining every cent I had to my name to ensure Lily would grow up in a safe, stable home. During the darkest days of that custody battle, it was the dead of winter in Ohio. My apartment's heating system broke, and my bank account was overdrawn from paying legal retainers. Lily was only 2 years old, wrapped in 3 layers of blankets. I swallowed my pride, picked up the phone, and called my parents. I asked for a $500 loan just to fix the furnace. My mother sighed heavily into the receiver. "Joshua, you made your bed. Now you have to lie in it. Giving you money won't teach you responsibility. You need to figure this out yourself." She hung up. I ended up selling my only mode of transportation, a beat-up Honda Civic, to fix the heater, and I rode the bus to the auto shop for a year and a half. Yet, their financial philosophy completely reversed when they were the ones in need. 2 years after I won full custody, my uncle passed away suddenly. He left behind a mountain of debt and no life insurance. The funeral home was demanding payment upfront for the casket and the service. We were sitting in the sterile, overly air-conditioned office of the funeral director. My mother looked at the invoice, started sobbing theatrically, and turned to me. "Joshua, your father's business is slow right now. We are completely cash poor. Please, you have to cover this. It's for family." I had been working overtime for 2 years, desperately trying to build a small safety net. I wrote a check for $8,500 to the funeral director. My mother hugged me, called me a lifesaver, and promised to pay me back. I never saw a single dime of that money. The requests never stopped. When Matthew decided he wanted to buy his first house, he didn't have a down payment because he spent his commission checks on designer clothes and expensive dinners. My mother called me not to ask, but to instruct me. "Matthew found the perfect house in a great neighborhood, Joshua. But the bank needs a larger down payment. I need you to wire him $15,000. I was standing in my kitchen holding Lily's school lunchbox. "Mom, I can't do that. I'm trying to build a college fund for Lily. I put away $50 a week. I can't just drain her future for Matthew's house." How can you be so selfish? Her voice turned sharp, cutting like a knife. He is your brother. Family helps family, Joshua. He needs to establish himself. You already have a decent apartment. Don't ruin this for him. The guilt trips were relentless. She would call me every day, crying, manipulating, telling me I was tearing the family apart by being greedy. Finally, exhausted and wanting peace, I caved. I transferred the money. Matthew didn't even call to thank me. He sent a text message with a thumbs-up emoji. I became the family's quiet, reliable emergency fund. If my father's truck needed a transmission rebuild, I did it for free on my day off, paying for the parts out of my own pocket. If my mother wanted to host a lavish Thanksgiving dinner to impress her friends, I was expected to pay for the groceries and the expensive wine. I paid for family vacations to Florida that I couldn't even attend because I had to work. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I was met with emotional blackmail. I honestly believed that if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, and solved enough of their problems, they would eventually look at me the way they looked at Matthew. I thought I could buy their love. I was completely wrong. The ultimate betrayal, the one that truly opened my eyes to the depth of their manipulation, didn't happen at that brunch. It happened a year prior, on a rainy Tuesday morning. I had just earned a massive promotion at the auto shop. After 10 years of busting my knuckles, the owner, Joseph, made me the lead service manager. It came with a significant salary bump and a real office. I was finally breathing easy. Lily was getting older, and I wanted to move her out of our cramped apartment into a real house with a backyard in a good school district. I had saved diligently, repaired my credit score to an immaculate 800, and was ready to buy our first real home. I put on my best shirt and went to the local bank branch to get pre-approved for a mortgage. I sat in the plush leather chair across from Mr. Henderson, a loan officer I had known for years. He took my paperwork, smiled warmly, and started typing into his computer. A few minutes later, his smile vanished. He furrowed his brow, clicked his mouse a few times, and leaned back in his chair, looking at me with deep concern. Joshua, is there something you forgot to disclose on this application? He asked, his tone serious. No, sir. Everything should be there. Steady income, no credit card debt, good down payment? I replied, suddenly feeling a cold sweat prickle the back of my neck. Mr. Henderson turned his heavy monitor around to face me. Joshua, your debt-to-income ratio is incredibly high. You have a massive auto loan open in your name, and worse, it is currently in default status. It's destroying your credit score. I leaned in, squinting at the screen. My heart slammed against my ribs. There it was, clear as day on the official credit report. An active loan for $110,000. The vehicle listed was a brand new Porsche 911. I don't own a Porsche, I stammered, the room suddenly spinning. I drive a 10-year-old Ford truck. The loan was taken out 8 months ago, Mr. Henderson said softly, pointing to the screen. And it is co-signed. The primary driver is listed as Matthew. The floor completely dropped out from beneath me. I didn't even finish the appointment. I grabbed my paperwork, stumbled out of the bank into the pouring rain, and sat in my truck for 20 minutes, just trying to remember how to breathe. I drove straight to the repair shop and walked into Joseph's office. Joseph was a tough, grizzled mechanic who had been more of a father figure to me than my own dad ever was. I threw the papers on his desk and explained what happened. Joseph's face turned beet red. He slammed his fist on the desk, rattling his coffee mug. That is identity fraud, Josh, Joseph growled, his voice thick with anger. Your own mother used your social security number and your pristine credit history to buy that spoiled brat a luxury sports car because his credit is probably garbage. You need to call the police. I didn't call the police. I drove straight to my parents' house in the affluent suburbs. I didn't bother knocking. I unlocked the front door and marched straight into the massive, custom-built kitchen where my mother was calmly arranging expensive imported flowers in a crystal vase. I threw the printed credit report onto the pristine marble countertop. The papers slid and hit the vase. What the hell is this? I demanded, my voice a dangerous, low rumble that I barely recognized as my own. She looked at the papers, her expression completely unchanged. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Oh, Joshua, please don't be so dramatic. Keep your voice down. The neighbors will hear." $110,000, Mom," I yelled, unable to contain the fury. "For a Porsche. And it is 3 months behind on payments. I went to the bank today to buy a house for Lily, and I got denied. Because of you." "Matthew needed a reliable car for his new luxury real estate job," she said, waving her hand dismissively as if we were discussing a bicycle. "His credit was just a little tied up at the moment. He needs to project an image of success to get high-end clients. We were going to refinance and transfer the loan entirely out of your name in a few months anyway." "You forged my signature," I screamed, pacing the kitchen floor. "I could lose my apartment. I should call a lawyer right now and report this as criminal fraud." The moment I said the word lawyer, her entire demeanor shifted. The Ice Queen vanished, replaced instantly by the weeping, desperate victim. She collapsed into a dining chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing loudly. "You would send your own mother to jail?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. "Over a piece of paper? It would ruin Matthew's life. He would lose his license. Chloe would leave him. You would be destroying this entire family because you are too selfish to help your brother succeed." She weaponized my guilt perfectly. She knew exactly which buttons to push. She begged. She pleaded. She told me my father's heart couldn't take the stress of a police investigation. Like an absolute fool, I broke. I couldn't bring myself to put my mother in handcuffs. I went to the bank the next day, withdrew a massive chunk of the money I had been saving for Lily's college fund, and paid the $8,000 in past due payments and late fees just to save my own credit score from total destruction. The very next day, Matthew's wife, Chloe, posted a photo on Instagram. It was heavily filtered, showing her wearing designer sunglasses, leaning against the hood of the gleaming silver Porsche 911. The caption read, "Hubby worked so hard to spoil me. We earned this. #blessed #luxury life. I was working overtime to pay off their luxury car, sacrificing my daughter's future, while they played pretend millionaires on the internet. That was the reality of my family." Fast forward back to the Sunday of the brunch. The drive home from the country club was suffocatingly silent. The rain had started to fall, the windshield wipers squeaking rhythmically against the glass. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were stark white, my jaw aching from grinding my teeth. In the back seat, Lily had fallen asleep, her head resting against the window. She was emotionally exhausted. Being treated like an invisible ghost by her own grandmother took a heavy toll on her little heart. Sarah reached across the center console and placed her soft, warm hand over my rigid fist. Sarah is an elementary school teacher. She possesses infinite patience, a deep well of empathy, and a heart of absolute gold. She didn't come into my life trying to fix me or change me. She just stood firmly beside me in the storm. More importantly, she loved Lily with the fierce, protective energy of a biological mother. "I am so incredibly sorry, Josh," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with genuine pain for me. "I'm not doing it, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking with a decade of buried rage finally bubbling to the surface. "I am absolutely not doing it. I'm not taking their $5,000 handout. I'm not making you wear a cheap dress in a rented VFW hall while Chloe struts around dripping in diamonds. And I am absolutely not leaving my daughter out of my own wedding photos to satisfy their twisted idea of tradition." Sarah didn't argue. She didn't tell me to calm down. She didn't tell me to be the bigger person and forgive them. She just squeezed my hand tightly and nodded. "Then we don't. We walk away." We pulled into our driveway. The rain was coming down harder now. I carefully unbuckled Lily, carried her sleeping body into the house, and gently tucked her into her bed, kissing her forehead. When I walked back out to the kitchen, Sarah was sitting at the small wooden dining table. Her laptop was open, casting a soft blue glow across her face. I pulled out a chair and sat heavily across from her, burying my face in my hands. I don't know what to do, Sarah. If we cancel, they win. If we go through with it, they win. I just want to marry you, and I want Lily to feel like she belongs. Sarah turned the laptop screen toward me. Do you remember my Uncle Carter? She asked. I looked up. Yeah, I remember him. Uncle Carter was a legend in Sarah's family, though they rarely spoke of him because he lived a life completely detached from their small-town drama. He was an investor, a man of old money, who had relocated to Italy decades ago. I had met him exactly once at a family reunion. He was a tall, incredibly distinguished man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, carrying himself with a quiet, undeniable authority. He was the kind of man who commanded a room simply by walking into it. He sent me a long email last week when I sent him our save-the-date card, Sarah said, scrolling down the screen. He owns a private, historical estate just outside of Florence. He said his traveling days are mostly over, but if we ever wanted to skip the circus of an American wedding, his home is completely open to us. No strings attached, no family drama, just the three of us. I leaned in, looking at the photos attached to the email. It was breathtaking. Ancient stone walls covered in climbing ivy, sprawling green vineyards stretching to the horizon. A massive oak dining table set under a canopy of glowing string lights. It looked like a movie set. It looked peaceful. It looked completely out of reach. Sarah, it's beautiful, but we can't afford last-minute international flights to Italy. I started, my logical brain immediately calculating the impossible costs. You have air miles, Josh? She interrupted, her eyes locking fiercely onto mine. You've been using the shop's corporate purchasing card to buy engine parts for Joseph for 5 years. You have over 500,000 miles banked. That's enough for 3 first-class tickets. I blinked, the realization slowly dawning on me. We have the money we saved ourselves in our joint account, Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength and momentum. We don't need a single cent from your mother. We don't need their approval, their budget, or their presence. We just pack our bags, we take Lily, and we go. We get married on our own terms. A spark ignited deep in the center of my chest. It wasn't just a way to have a beautiful wedding. It was an escape hatch. It was a way to finally, permanently close the door on the people who only loved me when I was actively paying their bills. I looked at Sarah, seeing the fierce determination in her eyes, and I knew she was right. Okay, I said, a slow smile finally breaking across my face. Let's go to Italy. The very next morning, Monday, I didn't go into the shop right away. I sat at my home office desk with a large cup of black coffee, my notebook, and my cell phone. I started the systematic process of dismantling the illusion of a family wedding. I didn't make a dramatic Facebook post. I didn't send angry text messages to Matthew or my mother demanding apologies. I operated in absolute, terrifying silence. First, I called the local banquet hall we had booked months ago. The manager was polite but firm. Mr. Joshua, I understand circumstances change, but as per the contract, you will lose the $3,200 non-refundable deposit if you cancel this close to the date. Keep it, I said without a single ounce of hesitation. Cancel the reservation. Losing $3,000 stung, but it felt like paying a ransom to finally secure my freedom. Next, I called the local florist. Cancelled. The catering company. Cancelled. The bakery making the cake. Cancelled. One by one, I took a pair of scissors and cut every single string connecting me to the humiliating circus my mother had planned. By noon, the job was done. I put on my work boots, drove to the auto shop, and threw myself into my work. I was underneath a massive Ford F-150, replacing a rusted exhaust manifold, when I heard the heavy thud of work boots walking into my bay. I slid out on the plastic creeper and looked up. It was my cousin, Elijah. Elijah was my mother's nephew, a guy who always played the role of the family peacemaker, which really just meant he was a coward who enabled bad behavior. He was the kind of guy who would pat you on the back, hand you a cold beer, and tell you to just go along to get along, whenever my mother went on a tyrannical rampage. He was standing there, wiping his hands on his jeans, looking nervously around the busy garage. He had driven his beat-up 2015 Honda Civic into the shop. "Hey, Josh," Elijah said, forcing an overly enthusiastic smile. "Man, you were hard at work today." I grabbed a shop rag and wiped the grease from my hands, standing up slowly. I didn't smile back. I just stared at him. "What do you need, Elijah?" He shifted his weight uncomfortably. "Well, Auntie, your mom. She's a little stressed out today. She said you aren't returning any of her phone calls about the catering menu for the reception. She asked me to swing by and check on you." "The menu is handled, Elijah. There is nothing to discuss," I said flatly, turning back to my toolbox. Elijah sighed, leaning against the metal workbench, trying to play the sympathetic friend. "Look, man, I get it. I know the brunch yesterday was really rough. Auntie can be harsh sometimes. But you know how she is. Matthew is her baby. She just wants things a certain way." He took a step closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Just let her have this one, okay? Take the $5,000 check she's offering, throw a nice little barbecue in the park with some beers, and keep everyone happy. Don't make a massive scene and ruin the family dynamic over pride." The sheer audacity of his request made my jaw clench. He wasn't here to check on my mental health. He was here as an emissary, sent by the queen to ensure the peasant didn't step out of line. "I'm not making a scene, Elijah," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Everything is completely under control. You can tell my mother not to worry about a single detail." Elijah's face relaxed into a relieved grin. He thought he had successfully handled the situation. He thought I was folding just like I always did. "Good man. That's the Josh I know," he chuckled, slapping my shoulder. "Hey, while I'm here, can you do me a massive favor? Can you take a look at my brakes? They've been grinding really badly when I stop, and I am super tight on cash this week. For 10 years, I had maintained Elijah's car for free. I paid for the oil, the filters, the brake pads, everything just because he was family." "Leave the keys on the desk," I said coldly. "I'll pull it into the bay after lunch." "You're a lifesaver, bro," he smiled, tossing the keys onto my desk and walking out of the garage to catch an Uber. As I watched him walk away, I felt a deep, sickening wave of disgust. I knew he was a pawn, but I was about to find out just how deep his betrayal actually went. A few hours later, the lunchtime rush had cleared out. The garage was relatively quiet, save for the hum of the air compressor in the corner. I grabbed Elijah's keys, walked out to the lot, and pulled his rusted Honda Civic into bay number 3. I popped the hood, checked the fluid levels, and then opened the driver's side door to check the exact mileage on the dashboard for the work order ticket. Sitting right there, perfectly centered in the cup holder, was his smartphone. The screen was cracked, but it was lit up brightly. Elijah was careless. He had left the phone completely unlocked, the screen timeout disabled. Now, I am a man of principle. I do not snoop through people's personal belongings. It goes against everything I believe in. I reached over to move the phone to the passenger seat so it wouldn't get dirty. But as my fingers brushed the edge of the device, a text message notification popped down from the top banner of the screen. The contact name was saved simply as Auntie, my mother. The preview text read, "Did you talk to him? Make sure he physically takes the $5,000 in a paper check. I need him to endorse it over to me immediately so I can pay for the suspension repairs on Matthew's Porsche. He can just use his own savings for his little park wedding." My blood instantly turned to ice. My hand hovered over the phone, trembling slightly. The moral dilemma evaporated in a split second. I picked up the phone. I swiped down to open the full message thread. I stood there in the quiet garage, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing loudly above my head, and I read through weeks of conversations between my cousin and my mother. It was an absolute goldmine of betrayal, a digital record of how little they valued my existence. "Elijah, I'm at the shop now. Talk to him. He seems fine. Totally bought it. Mom, good. Keep a very close eye on him. If he tries to back out or gets emotional, Remind him about how we helped him pay for Lily's custody lawyers years ago. Play the guilt card hard. We absolutely need that 5,000 back. Chloe is throwing a massive fit about the car's suspension and making Matthew miserable. Elijah, don't worry, Auntie. Josh is a total pushover. He'll do whatever you want if you guilt trip him enough. Just have the check ready on Sunday. Mom, you are such a good boy, Elijah. We will have you over for steak dinner this weekend to say thank you. I read the messages 3 times, letting the reality of the words burn into my brain. They weren't even giving me a $5,000 budget. It was an elaborate theatrical scam. My mother intended to hand me a physical check in front of the extended family to look like a benevolent, generous saint. Then, she planned to manipulate me, using the traumatic custody of my own daughter as leverage, to force me to sign the money right back to her, so she could fix the luxury car she bought on my stolen credit for my golden child brother. And my cousin, a man who was currently asking me for free mechanical labor, was the spy orchestrating the entire trap for a steak dinner. I didn't smash the phone against the concrete floor, even though every fiber of my being wanted to. I didn't take screenshots. I carefully, meticulously set the phone back into the cup holder, placing it in the exact same position I had found it. I walked over to the parts department. I ordered the absolute most expensive premium ceramic brake pads we carried. I spent the next hour installing them perfectly. Then I went to the computer and generated an invoice. I billed him for the premium parts. I billed him for 2 hours of labor at the maximum shop rate. I added shop fees and taxes. The total came to $485. At 5 p.m., Elijah strolled back into the shop, looking relaxed and happy. "Car all good to go, Josh?" I didn't smile. I handed him the printed invoice. Elijah looked at the paper, his eyes going wide. "Whoa, hey, what is this? $480? Man, I thought you were just going to take care of it for me like always. I don't have this kind of cash." I leaned over the counter, my eyes boring a hole directly through his skull. "Parts and labor cost money, Elijah. I don't work for free anymore. You can pay with cash, or you can use a credit card." He looked at my face, realizing something had fundamentally shifted. He stammered, pulling out a credit card with shaking hands and tapping it on the machine. I handed him his keys, my expression completely dead. "Everything is perfectly clear now, Elijah," I said, my voice dripping with icy finality. "Have a nice life." He practically ran to his car and sped out of the parking lot. It took exactly 3 days for the local vendors to process the cancellations, update their ledgers, and for the devastating news to finally make its way back to my mother's meticulously organized desk. It was Wednesday evening. I was in my living room, my suitcase open on the floor, carefully packing my best suit. Sarah was in Lily's room, helping her fold her favorite dresses into a small pink carry-on bag. Suddenly, my cell phone started vibrating violently against the glass of the coffee table. I took a deep, centering breath. I looked down the hallway at Sarah, who paused in the doorway, watching me with quiet strength. I picked up the phone and pressed answer. "Hello. What the hell did you do?" she screamed. The shrillness of her voice was so intense I actually had to hold the phone a few inches away from my ear. She wasn't just angry. She was hysterical. "The manager at the Oakwood Banquet Hall just called me," she shrieked. "They said you called on Monday and canceled the entire reservation. Are you out of your mind? Are you actively trying to embarrass us in front of the entire community, Joshua? Do you have any idea how this makes the family look?" "It doesn't make the family look like anything," I said, my voice eerily, unnervingly calm. "Because there is no family event to look at. You are throwing a temper tantrum like a spoiled child," she yelled, her voice echoing in the quiet of my living room. "Just because you are insanely jealous of Matthew. You listen to me right now. You will call them back immediately, you will beg for that venue back, and you will accept the budget I graciously gave you. If you do not fix this right now, I swear to God, Joshua, you are completely cut off. We will not attend your wedding, your father will not speak to you, and you will have absolutely nothing." She played her final card. She expected me to panic. She expected the threat of her absence, the threat of being orphaned by the family, to break my resolve. She expected the pushover mechanic who always fixed the problems. "Don't threaten me with a good time, Mom," I said smoothly. There was a stunned, heavy silence on the other end of the line. She had never, in 35 years, heard me speak to her with that tone of voice. "Excuse me? You heard me?" I continued, feeling a massive weight lifting off my shoulders with every word. "And let's drop the act. I know about the plan to take the $5,000 back to pay for Matthew's Porsche repairs. I saw the text messages on Elijah's phone. You didn't want to fund a wedding. You wanted to fund your golden child's luxury lifestyle, using me as the middleman to launder the money. Again." I could hear her sharp intake of breath. The silence stretched on for 5 seconds. "Joshua, you are completely misunderstanding the situation." Her voice dropped an entire octave. The aggressive shouting was gone, replaced instantly by the frantic scrambling of a manipulator whose trap had just been exposed. "I'm not misunderstanding anything," I stated, the boundary solidifying like reinforced concrete in my chest. "I'm not funding a family that won't even include my child in a photograph. I am done being your ATM, and I am done playing your twisted games. You are making a massive mistake," she hissed venomously, the mask slipping completely. "You need us. You will come crawling back when you fail. You always do. Watch me," I said. I pulled the phone away from my ear, looked at the screen, and pressed the red button. I didn't stop there. I opened my contacts list. I selected my mother's number, scrolled to the bottom, and hit block caller. I went to Matthew's number. Blocked. I went to Elijah's number. Blocked. My father. Blocked. I set the phone down on the coffee table. The house was completely silent. The constant, low-level anxiety that had hummed in my veins for my entire adult life was suddenly gone. I looked down the hallway at Sarah. She was smiling, tears welling up in her eyes. I went back to my suitcase and zipped it shut. We had a flight to catch. Stepping off the long, exhausting flight and walking out of the terminal in Florence, Italy, felt like stepping onto an entirely different planet. The air hit us immediately. It was warm, earthy, laced with the smell of citrus trees, roasting espresso, and ancient dust. The frantic, toxic, heavy energy of Ohio was an ocean away, left behind in the blocked messages on my phone. We hailed a taxi, and for the next 45 minutes, Lily pressed her face against the glass window, her eyes wide with absolute wonder as we drove through the rolling hills of the Tuscan countryside. We finally pulled up to a massive, ornate wrought iron gate. The taxi driver spoke rapidly into an intercom, and the gates slowly, silently swung open, revealing Uncle Carter's estate. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the tacky, oversized McMansion style that my brother Matthew constantly drooled over and tried to sell. It was true old money, elegant, quiet, and deeply steeped in history. Tall, ancient cypress trees lined the long gravel driveway, leading up to a sprawling stone villa covered in thick, green ivy. Uncle Carter was waiting for us on the wide stone steps of the front entrance. He wore a perfectly tailored beige linen suit, his silver hair neatly combed back. He held a wooden walking cane with a silver handle, though he seemed to carry it more for style and presence than out of any physical necessity. As we got out of the taxi, I braced myself for the usual awkward family greetings. But Carter didn't look at me, and he didn't look at Sarah first. He walked slowly and purposefully straight toward my daughter. He didn't bend over awkwardly, and he didn't use that condescending, high-pitched voice adults usually use with children. He planted his cane, lowered himself slowly until one knee rested on the gravel, placing himself exactly at Lily's eye level. "You must be Miss Lily," Carter said, his voice deep, resonant, and incredibly warm. Lily froze for a second, intimidated by the grand surroundings, and nodded shyly, clutching her worn stuffed bear tightly to her chest. "I am Carter," he said smoothly, "and I want you to know that I am incredibly honored to have such a beautiful, intelligent young lady in my home. Welcome to Italy, Principessa." He extended his large, weathered hand toward her. Lily looked back at me, her eyes wide with a question. I gave her an encouraging nod. She reached out her small hand and shook his. A massive, genuine smile broke across her face, lighting up her entire expression. I felt a sudden, fierce burn in the back of my throat, and tears pricked the corners of my eyes. This man, who shared absolutely no blood with my daughter, who had never met her before this moment, had shown her more respect, dignity, and genuine kindness in 10 seconds than my own biological mother had shown her in 9 years. He didn't see her as baggage from a previous relationship. He didn't see her as an inconvenience to be hidden from photographs. He saw her as a guest of honor. Carter stood up with a soft groan, using his cane, and embraced Sarah warmly. Then he turned to me. He reached out and gripped my hand firmly, pulling me into a strong, brotherly hug. "You made a very long journey, Joshua," Carter said quietly, patting my back. "Leave your heavy bags at the door. Leave your worries at the gate. You are completely safe here." We spent that entire afternoon sitting on a sun-drenched stone terrace overlooking the vineyards, eating fresh pasta and drinking cold water with lemon. Nobody checked their smartphones. Nobody made passive-aggressive comments about money or budgets. Nobody treated me like the hired mechanic. For the very first time in my 35 years of life, I was simply a man, sitting peacefully with his family, being treated as an equal. Fan 4.2. Cohen Kok Ben Yen Truok Geo Ji So 2. 852. The night before the wedding, the massive villa was dead quiet. Sarah and Lily had gone to sleep hours ago in a breathtaking bedroom with high frescoed ceilings and heavy silk curtains. But I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline of the escape, mixed with the profound beauty of our new surroundings, was still thrumming heavily in my veins. I wandered out of the bedroom and stepped onto the wide stone balcony overlooking the estate. The night air was cool, and the sky was completely clear, filled with thousands of brilliant stars. I held a glass of local red wine, simply breathing in the silence. I heard the soft tap of a cane on the stone floor behind me. It was Uncle Carter, wearing a silk robe, carrying his own glass of dark wine. He walked up to the railing and stood beside me, looking out at the rolling hills illuminated by the massive, silver moon. "It's hard, isn't it?" Carter said softly, his voice barely breaking the silence, not turning his head to look at me. "Severing the infected limb to save the rest of the body." I looked down at my glass, swirling the dark liquid. "I just feel stupid, Carter. I let them treat me like a bank account for over a decade. I let them use my credit, drain my savings, and disrespect my child. I actually thought if I just worked hard enough and paid enough of their bills, they would eventually love me." Carter took a slow, measured sip of his wine. He let out a long sigh. "Generational wealth isn't just about money, Joshua. Money is the easiest thing in the world to lose. True inheritance, the kind that actually matters, is about passing down respect, integrity, and honor." He turned slowly to face me, his piercing blue eyes locking onto mine with intense clarity. "Your family, they operate on a currency of guilt, manipulation, and conditional love. They view your loyalty, your hard work, and your kind heart not as virtues, but as weaknesses to be ruthlessly exploited." He pointed a long finger toward the window of the bedroom where my daughter was sleeping. "A man's true inheritance is the peace and safety he builds for his own children. You protected your daughter. You protected your bride. You walked away from the poison. There is nothing stupid about that. That is the mark of a king defending his castle." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding in my chest for 15 years. The validation from this man, this patriarch, washed over me like cool water on a severe burn. "Tomorrow," Carter continued, his tone turning fiercely protective, his posture straightening, "you marry the woman you love, you celebrate with the child you raised, and you leave the leeches to starve in their own swamp. Do you understand me?" "I understand," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "Good," Carter smiled grimly, the moonlight catching a dangerous glint in his eye. Because when the storm hits, and trust me, it will hit with absolute fury when they realize they have completely lost their grip on your wallet, you must remain a mountain. Let them scream, let them threaten, and do not worry about the noise they make on the internet. I have a feeling they are about to learn a very hard, very public lesson about who actually holds the real power in this world. He raised his glass and clinked it against mine. The fine crystal rang out clearly in the cool Italian night air. I didn't fully understand what he meant at that exact moment. I didn't know about the absolute hellfire and financial ruin Uncle Carter was about to rain down on my mother and brother. But standing there under the Tuscan sky, I finally felt armed, ready, and completely unafraid of the war that was coming. The next morning in Italy was something out of a dream. But the true center of the entire day was my daughter, Lily. Carter had arranged for a local florist to make her a delicate crown of small white flowers. She wore her pale yellow sundress, and she stood right between Sarah and me, holding our hands tightly. She wasn't pushed to the side. She wasn't hidden away to preserve some twisted, elitist idea of family tradition. She was the absolute heart of our union. When the official asked the traditional question of whether anyone objected to the marriage, Lily actually raised her small hand high in the air, like she was answering a question in her classroom back home. The official paused, looking slightly confused. Lily giggled, her eyes shining brightly. "I just want to say, I definitely do not object," she announced proudly. Carter let out a booming laugh from the side, clapping his hands together. Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek, and I pulled Lily in, kissing the top of her head. My eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in my life, they were tears of absolute joy. I was finally giving my daughter the stable, loving home I had fought for during that brutal custody battle years ago. After the short ceremony, we didn't have a massive photo shoot with a dozen screaming relatives. We asked the official to take exactly one picture. It was just the three of us. Me and Sarah standing close together, with Lily right in front. All of us smiling genuinely into the camera with the breathtaking Italian landscape stretching out behind us. I looked at the photo on my phone. It was perfect. It was everything I had ever wanted. I opened my Facebook app. I didn't write a long, defensive paragraph explaining myself. I didn't tag any of my family members back in Ohio. I didn't even put a caption. I simply attached the photo, hit post, and completely powered off my phone. We spent the rest of the evening sitting at Carter's long wooden dining table on the stone terrace. The private chef Carter hired brought out plate after plate of incredible food. We ate roasted meats, fresh bread dipped in olive oil, and drank wine that tasted like liquid gold. We ate our wedding cake with our fingers, laughing until our stomachs hurt. Carter poured a tiny splash of sparkling water into a crystal champagne flute for Lily, treating her like an honored guest. I watched my daughter clink her glass against Carter's, her face glowing with pure, unfiltered happiness. I leaned back in my chair, looking up at the string lights glowing warmly above us. The knot in my stomach, the heavy, sickening rock I had carried inside me every single day since I was a teenager, was completely gone. I wasn't bracing for an insult. I wasn't waiting for someone to hand me a bill I couldn't afford. I was completely at peace. But I knew, thousands of miles away across the Atlantic Ocean, a massive bomb had just detonated. I kept my phone powered off until the next morning. When I finally woke up, poured myself a cup of strong black Italian coffee, and walked out onto the balcony, I held the button on the side of my phone. The screen lit up, and it was like holding a live grenade. The notifications flooded the screen so fast the phone actually froze for a few seconds. I had exactly 127 missed calls. My voicemail inbox was completely full. The text messages were stacked like a brick wall. Even though I had blocked my mother, Matthew, and Elijah, the rest of the extended family was out for blood. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in 5 years suddenly cared deeply about my life choices. Aunts and uncles who never once bothered to send Lily a birthday card were suddenly outraged on behalf of the family honor. I scrolled through the text messages from my cousin Dylan, the guy who still owed me $2,000 from a loan I gave him 3 years ago. "Dylan. Bro, what the hell is this picture? Are you serious right now? Dylan, Auntie is losing her mind. You really ran off to Europe like a coward instead of facing the family? Dylan, you are making everyone look terrible. You need to call your mom right now and apologize. I deleted the thread without replying. Then I opened Facebook. The single photo I had posted the day before had exploded. There were hundreds of comments. Friends from the auto shop and old high school buddies left heart emojis and congratulations. But nestled right in the middle of the positive comments was a massive, highly public attack from my mother's side of the family. They were furious that I had escaped their control. But what really drove them insane was the background of the photo. They recognized wealth when they saw it. They saw the manicured gardens, the ancient stone, the sheer elegance of the estate. It shattered their narrative that I was just the poor, struggling mechanic who needed their charity. And then I saw my mother's comment. She had used my father's Facebook account to bypass my block. She didn't send a private message. She wanted an audience. She wanted to control the public narrative and paint me as the villain before anyone else could figure out the truth. Her comment read, "Please everyone, do not encourage this behavior. Joshua is going through a very severe mental crisis right now. He is confused and acting out to hurt his family. This was not a real wedding. It is a desperate cry for attention. We are praying for him and we will handle this tragic situation privately as a family." I sat down heavily in one of the patio chairs, staring at the screen. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. This was not a real wedding. Even from thousands of miles away, she was still trying to erase my happiness. She was trying to strip away the validity of my marriage and the safety of my daughter just to protect her own fragile ego. I felt the old, familiar urge rising in my chest. The urge to explain myself. The urge to type out a massive, angry response detailing exactly how she had stolen my credit to buy Matthew a Porsche, how she had treated Lily like trash, and how they had planned to steal my wedding budget. I wanted to defend myself. "Do not engage," a deep voice said from the doorway. I looked up. Uncle Carter was standing there, fully dressed in a crisp suit, holding a silver tray with an espresso cup. He walked over, set the tray down on the small iron table, and looked at my phone. "They found the picture?" he asked calmly. "Yeah," I sighed, running a hand over my face. "My mother is posting public comments saying I'm having a mental breakdown and that my marriage isn't real. She's trying to humiliate me into coming back." Carter didn't look angry. He looked profoundly disappointed in them. He pulled out his reading glasses from his breast pocket and held out his hand. "May I?" I handed him my phone. He stood on the balcony, the morning sun catching his silver hair, and read through the comments. He read my mother's manipulative paragraph. He didn't swear. He didn't yell. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. "Joshua," Carter said, handing the phone back to me, "I told you last night that true power does not need to shout. True power simply states the facts. Give me a moment." He reached into his own pocket, pulled out his smartphone, and opened his Facebook app. I sat there watching Carter type methodically with his index finger. He wasn't rushing. He was crafting a completely surgical strike. Carter was well known in the extended family tree, but he was treated like a myth. Everyone knew Sarah's uncle was an incredibly wealthy investor who owned multiple properties in Europe, but nobody from my mother's side had ever directly interacted with him. To my mother, who worshipped money and status above all else, Carter was the ultimate authority figure she desperately wanted to impress. Carter finished typing, hit send, and placed his phone face down on the table. He picked up his espresso. "It is done. Now we enjoy the morning." I immediately refreshed my Facebook post. Right below my mother's long, manipulative paragraph claiming I was insane, a new comment appeared. Carter's comment read, "What a beautiful ceremony at my estate. I have hosted many events in my life, but rarely have I seen a man of such immense integrity, character, and quiet strength as Joshua. He is a true father and a devoted husband. It is my absolute honor to welcome him and his beautiful daughter Lily into our family. Furthermore, Joshua has proven himself so incredibly capable that I have decided to name him a primary beneficiary of my estate's inheritance and the family trust. He wasn't finished. He added a second paragraph, and this was the killing blow. As for those attempting to cast shadows on this joyous day, let me be perfectly clear. My gates are permanently closed to individuals who steal their children's credit scores to finance luxury sports cars they cannot afford. A man who pays for his brother's Porsche while his own family disrespects his daughter is a saint. Those who took advantage of him are parasites. Joshua is safe here. Do not contact him again. I stopped breathing. I read the comment 3 times. My hands started shaking, not from fear, but from the most massive adrenaline rush of pure, unadulterated justice I had ever experienced. Uncle Carter hadn't just defended me. He had publicly exposed their darkest, most shameful secret, the stolen credit and the Porsche, to their entire social circle, their church friends, and their country club acquaintances. He ripped the mask of the perfect, wealthy family right off their faces and exposed them as the financial frauds they truly were. And by mentioning the inheritance, he established me as untouchable in my mother's eyes. The reaction was instantaneous. Within 60 seconds, my mother deleted her comment. 5 minutes later, my cousin Dylan deleted his negative replies. The Ohio crowd went completely, utterly silent. There were no more text messages. There were no more missed calls. They were terrified. Carter had used the one weapon they respected more than anything else: immense wealth and social destruction. Carter looked at me over the rim of his espresso cup. In families like yours, Joshua, they do not respect boundaries unless someone higher on their invisible social ladder enforces them. Your mother has spent her entire life acting like she is the top rung. I just reminded her that she is not even on the ladder. I slumped back in my chair, letting out a laugh of pure disbelief and relief. The heavy, dark cloud that had followed me my entire life evaporated in the Tuscan sun. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment 1 below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The profound silence from Ohio lasted exactly 2 hours. Carter's public execution of my mother's reputation had sent them into a complete tailspin. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. Once the initial shock wore off, the financial reality of what had just happened was going to hit them like a freight train. I didn't wait for them to regroup. I went back into the bedroom, pulled my laptop out of my bag, and opened my banking application. For the past 5 years, my bank account had essentially been a leaking bucket. I had automatic transfers set up to keep my family afloat because I was conditioned to believe it was my duty. It was time to stop the bleeding. I clicked on the Scheduled Transfers tab. First on the list, a $400 monthly transfer to my parents' joint account. It was originally supposed to be a temporary measure to help them pay a surprisingly high winter heating bill 3 years ago. They simply never told me to stop sending it, and whenever I brought it up, my mother would complain about the rising cost of groceries. I hovered my mouse over the Cancel button. I clicked it. A green checkmark appeared. Transfer deleted. Next, a $200 monthly transfer directly to Matthew. He called it an investment in his real estate marketing. I called it charity to keep his wife Chloe from complaining about his lack of actual sales. Click. Deleted. But the final item on the list was the big one. It was the auto insurance premium for the Porsche 911. When my mother had initially guilt-tripped me into catching up the loan payments to save my credit, she also begged me to cover the premium insurance policy because Matthew couldn't quite swing it this month. That was 9 months ago. I had been paying $350 a month to insure a car I wasn't legally allowed to drive. I didn't just cancel the auto pay. I called the insurance company directly. I spoke to an agent, verified my identity, and completely canceled the policy on the vehicle. Since my name was attached to the financing, I had the right to strip the insurance. If Matthew drove that car onto the street tomorrow, he would be driving completely uninsured. I closed my laptop. The physical act of clicking those buttons felt incredibly strange. It was like sweeping a floor you didn't even realize was covered in shattered glass. I was suddenly keeping almost $1,000 of my own hard-earned salary every single month. I looked over at Lily, who was sitting on the rug drawing a picture. That money wasn't going to fund a fake luxury lifestyle anymore. That money was going straight into her college fund. I had successfully cut off the blood supply to the parasites. Now all I had to do was watch them panic. The financial panic set in exactly 3 days later, coinciding perfectly with the first of the month when the bills were due. My phone, which had been blissfully quiet, started buzzing again. Because I had blocked the main culprits, they resorted to sending flying monkeys. My Uncle David, a man who had sat silently at the brunch while my mother humiliated my daughter, sent me a long, rambling text message. "David, Josh, buddy, we really need to talk. Your dad is a wreck. Your mom hasn't stopped crying for 3 days. That comment Carter left caused a massive fight with her friends at the club. Plus, Matthew just found out his car insurance was canceled. He can't drive to his open houses. Look, I know you're mad, but you're destroying the family financially. Be the bigger man. Call your mom and fix this." I read the message and felt a cold wave of absolute indifference. David didn't care about my feelings. He just wanted the boat to stop rocking so he wouldn't have to listen to my mother scream anymore. I blocked his number too. Then my voicemail indicator flashed. It was a message from an unknown number. I listened to it. It was my father. My father never involved himself in the family drama. His survival tactic was to keep his head down and let my mother run the show. Hearing his voice on the machine was jarring. "Joshua, it's Dad." His voice sounded incredibly tired, raspy and weak. "Son, I don't know what you did, but the bank just called Matthew. Because the insurance was canceled, the lender is threatening to call the entire auto loan due immediately. We don't have the cash to cover it. Your mother is having a nervous breakdown. Please just wire the insurance money. We can talk about the rest later. You know your brother needs that car. Call me back." I listened to the message twice. I listened closely for an apology. I listened for him to say he missed me, or that he was happy I got married, or that he wanted to talk to Lily. Nothing. He didn't miss his oldest son. He missed the mechanic who fixed his problems. He missed the ATM. He was calling to beg for his golden child's luxury car, while completely ignoring the fact that I had just started a new life. It was the final nail in the coffin. If there was even a tiny shred of guilt left in my heart, that voicemail completely eradicated it. I didn't call him back. I deleted the voicemail, permanently blocked the unknown number, and walked downstairs to join my wife and daughter for dinner. I was completely, utterly done. I had drawn a line in the sand, and for the first time in my life, I was standing firmly on the other side of it. We stayed in Italy for 2 weeks, soaking in the peace and building the foundation of our new family. When we finally returned to Ohio, the crisp, gray reality of the Midwest hit me, but my home felt entirely different. It didn't feel like a temporary shelter anymore. Felt like a fortress. 3 months passed. I threw myself into my work at the shop as the lead service manager. Without the constant drain of my family's financial demands, our bank accounts grew rapidly. Sarah and I finally started seriously looking at houses with big backyards. But the news from my former family inevitably trickled down to me through the grapevine of a small town. The house of cards my mother had built around Matthew had completely, spectacularly collapsed. Without my monthly cash injections, Matthew couldn't afford his lifestyle. And without the insurance I was paying for, the lender for the Porsche grew highly suspicious. They ran a routine check, discovered the missed payments my mother had been hiding, and realized the loan was highly volatile. One Tuesday afternoon, Joseph walked into my office at the garage, chuckling softly. He handed me a cup of coffee. "Hey Josh, you might want to hear this. My buddy runs the premier towing company in the next county over." I looked up from my paperwork. Yeah, Joseph grinned, a look of deep satisfaction on his weathered face. He just dispatched a repo truck to your brother's fancy subdivision this morning. Hooked up a silver Porsche 911 right out of the driveway in broad daylight. The neighbors were all watching. Apparently, your brother ran out in his bathrobe screaming at the driver, but the paperwork was ironclad. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of the hot coffee. The golden child had finally lost his crown. But the financial ruin didn't stop at the car. 2 weeks later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Chloe had packed her designer bags and moved back in with her parents. She filed for divorce almost immediately. Chloe was a woman who married for status and an illusion of wealth. The moment the Porsche was towed away and she realized Matthew was practically broke without his older brother paying the bills, she abandoned ship. Matthew, facing mounting debts and a divorce lawyer he couldn't afford, was forced to move out of his expensive house and back into his childhood bedroom at my parents' house. My mother had spent my entire life trying to elevate Matthew at my expense. She had stolen my credit, drained my savings, and insulted my daughter, all to build a pedestal for him. And in the end, without my money propping it up, the pedestal shattered under its own weight. It was poetic justice served cold and clean. I didn't gloat. I didn't drive by their house to point and laugh. I just went back to work, feeling the profound satisfaction of a man who finally let the trash take itself out. Autumn arrived, painting the Ohio trees in brilliant shades of orange and red. Sarah and I had officially moved out of the cramped apartment and purchased a beautiful, modest 3-bedroom house with a sprawling backyard for Lily to play in. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was on the front porch, assembling a wooden swing set, when a familiar truck pulled into my driveway. It was Gabriel, my younger cousin from my dad's side of the family. Gabriel was always the quiet one at family gatherings, an observer who kept his head down and avoided the crossfire. He stepped out of his truck holding a brown paper bag. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he walked up the driveway. "Hey, Josh," Gabriel said awkwardly, offering a small, tight smile. I put down my wrench and stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. I kept my guard up. "Hey, Gabe, what brings you out here?" He held out the paper bag. I brought some fresh apple cider donuts from the farm stand in town, and a little something for Lily, a new sketchbook. I know she likes to draw." I looked at the bag, then back at his face. He seemed genuine. I nodded slowly, accepting the bag. "Thanks. She's inside with Sarah. Have a seat." We sat on the wooden steps of the porch. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We just watched the autumn leaves blowing across the freshly cut grass of my new lawn. Gabriel finally let out a heavy sigh, resting his elbows on his knees. "I saw the new house on Facebook. It looks great, man. I'm really happy for you." "I appreciate that," I said quietly. Gabriel looked down at his boots. "Listen, Josh, I came over here because I needed to say something. To your face." He paused, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." I looked at him, slightly surprised. "Sorry for what? You didn't do anything." "That's exactly the problem," Gabriel said, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't do anything. None of us did. Look, the whole family. Everyone knew what Andy was doing to you. Everyone knew she forced you to pay for the funeral. Everyone knew Matthew couldn't afford that car and that she used your credit. We all talked about it behind closed doors." He turned to look at me, his eyes wide and earnest. "We all saw how she treated Lily at the brunch, but nobody stepped in. We were all just so terrified of becoming her next target that we let you take the bullets for years. You were the only one holding the family up, and we all just watched them bleed you dry because it was easier than fighting her." Hearing those words spoken out loud, having my reality finally validated by a member of the family, was like having a massive physical weight lifted off my chest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being overly sensitive. They all knew it was abuse, and they were just cowards. "I appreciate you saying that, Gabe. I really do," I said, my voice steady. "But it's over now. I'm out." "I know," Gabriel smiled sadly. When Carter posted that comment, it was like a nuke went off. Everyone finally realized you were the only real man in the entire family. I just wanted to tell you that you did the right thing. Don't ever let them pull you back in." We shook hands, a firm, real grip of mutual respect. Gabriel left a few minutes later, and as his truck disappeared down the road, it felt like the very last ghost of my past had finally been laid to rest. Later that evening, the sun had set, casting a warm, golden glow through the windows of our new living room. A fire was crackling quietly in the fireplace. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary filled the house. I walked into the living room and found Lily lying on her stomach on the plush rug. She had her new sketchbook open, the one Gabriel had brought, and was furiously coloring with a box of crayons. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly, sitting on the edge of the sofa near her. "What are you working on?" She looked up, a smudge of green crayon on her cheek, and smiled brightly. "I'm drawing our family, Dad." My heart gave a familiar little ache. I remembered the drawings she used to make back in the old apartment. Before the wedding, whenever she drew a picture of our family, she always drew herself standing slightly apart from the rest of the group. Sometimes she would draw my parents, but she would put a dark line between them and her. She carried the rejection they fed her deep in her subconscious. She picked up the sketchbook and held it up for me to see. I looked at the drawing, and a profound, overwhelming sense of peace washed over my entire soul. In the center of the page, drawn in bright, vibrant colors, were 4 figures standing in front of a giant, yellow sun. There was me wearing a blue shirt. Next to me was Sarah wearing her white dress. Next to Sarah was Uncle Carter, drawn with his silver hair and his wooden cane. And right in the middle, holding my hand and Sarah's hand, was Lily. She had drawn a massive, beaming smile on her own face and a little flower crown on her head. There was no grandmother who pushed her out of photos. There was no uncle who ignored her. There was no darkness, just a solid, unbreakable line of people holding hands. "Do you like it?" Lily asked, her eyes searching mine for approval. I slid off the sofa, sitting on the floor next to her, and pulled her into a tight hug. "I love it, sweetie. It's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen in my entire life. It's perfect." "Uncle Carter said I'm a principessa." She giggled into my shoulder. "That means princess." "He's right," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. "You absolutely are." I looked around the quiet, warm room. I thought about the $5,000 budget, the stolen credit, the insults, and the exhausting years of trying to buy my mother's love. I realized then that my mother had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. By pushing me to the absolute edge, by threatening the dignity of my daughter, she had finally forced me to open my eyes. She forced me to stop trying to survive in a toxic swamp, and instead, build my own castle. I had lost a group of people who shared my DNA, but I had gained a true family. Looking back now, years later, I don't feel anger toward my mother or Matthew anymore. Holding on to anger is just another way of letting them live rent-free in your head. I just feel a quiet, distant pity for them. They are trapped in a miserable cycle of fake status and endless debt, trying to impress people who don't actually care about them. The most important lesson I learned through all of this is that blood does not automatically make someone family. DNA is a biological fact, not a moral obligation. Family are the people who stand fiercely by your side when you have nothing left to offer them. Family are the people who look at your children and see a blessing, not a burden. Family are the people who celebrate your victories instead of tallying up your bank account. If you are listening to this right now, and you are the fixer in your family, if you are the one they only call when the rent is due, or the car is broken, or they need someone to blame, if you are setting yourself on fire just to keep toxic people warm, hear me right now. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect your own peace, your own salary, and your own children. The moment you stop handing them your money and your energy, they will call you selfish. They will scream, they will cry, and they will try to destroy your reputation. Let them throw their tantrums, because the silence that follows the storm is the most beautiful, liberating sound in the world. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a long journey, but I hope this resonated with you in some way, especially if you've ever felt like the black sheep just because you refused to be used. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, giving everything to people who appreciate nothing? For those of you who made it to the very end of this video, you belong to a special group I call the 1% Club. If you are still here, I want you to go down to the comments right now and drop the letter W for winner. That is our secret code to recognize the amazing people who watched this entire video and who understand the true value of walking away from toxic situations. Please don't forget to hit the like button and follow the channel. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to share more stories and lessons with you all very soon. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next one.